So welcome to our June huddle. This is our agenda. We're going to be talking with folks from the Redistricting Data Hub, and we're very excited about that. That's supposed to say local redistricting updates. Got a little mixed up there. We're going to talk just briefly about the schedule for this year's map making, attacks on direct democracy that are going on that are relevant to our fight, and do a little wrap up. And so, without further ado, I actually think that the redistricting folks are up first. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides and let you guys go ahead and share yours.
And I did want to introduce the folks from the Redistricting Data Hub. Kate's going to pull up her slides. So Kate is the director at the Redistricting Data Hub. Before that, she was an associate professor at St. John Fisher College. And so we're just really pleased that she's here. Now she's joined by one of her partners in crime, who is a data analyst. This is Peter Horton. And with that, put your questions in the Q&A, and then, please feel free, if you think of something or you just want to comment, put it right in the chat, but questions in the Q&A. And thank you, everybody. Kate, I'm just going to hand this off to you.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Mia, and thank all the rest of you for being here tonight. We are overjoyed, actually, to get into the weeds with you all about this data set. And as Catherine mentioned, Peter put in a tremendous amount of effort on it. So if there are any technical questions I'm not able to answer, he certainly will be able to field them. And if you do have questions throughout in the chat, Peter will probably jump in since it's easier for him to monitor that than I can. I'll also just note too, my internet's giving me a little bit of difficulties tonight. So if I start to freeze up or anything like that, I may go off camera just to make sure that things are going well enough. All right. So my agenda today is to first quickly introduce our organization and what we do, just like 2 minutes there. Then we're going to dive into the nitty-gritty of making what we shorthand to PBER, which is precinct boundaries joined with election results. I'll explain exactly what that is, why it's useful for redistricting, and then how we made it. And then I'll close with a few key takeaways and conclusions for you to think about, maybe to advocate for Ohio having better data, for example. So the Redistricting Data Hub was formed in 2019 to meet a key need identified as missing in the previous cycle, the 2011 cycle, that being a trusted central place for all the many data sets that are needed for nonpartisan redistricting. Redistricting, as many of you know, is a very data intensive and technical process. So we host a lot of data in all 50 states. Our mission is to provide all that data along with the accompanying tools and knowledge necessary to fight gerrymandering of all kinds. We also want to support folks participating effectively in state legislative, congressional, and increasingly local redistricting. RDH data has been used by expert witnesses in litigation in several states, including Ohio, as well as by special masters who are court-appointed map drawers. The data is used extensively by community organizers and advocates, journalists at various national and local outlets, academics working on research related to redistricting and other topics, and thousands of members of the public who want to get more engaged with the process. So today I'm here to talk about the most critical data set in redistricting that you've never heard of. Well, actually, I know some of you have heard of it, but we'll come back to that. Most of you have not heard of it. And that is a precinct boundary and election results file. Precinct boundaries and election results, or as I said, PBER, is a data set that combines election results at the precinct level with the geospatial boundaries of the precincts themselves. Precincts are the smallest unit at which election results are reported in most states. That includes Ohio. In the simplest terms, we take the precinct level election results and we join them with the geospatial data that captures where the boundaries, the physical boundaries of those precincts are. And this enables the visualization of election results on a map like you might need for redistricting. also enables the joining of election results with demographic data from the Census Bureau or with voter file data, for example. So census data is released on various census geographies, such as census blocks. And if you want to know how the demographics of a particular population correlate with the voting patterns in that same area, then you need to know how geographically the precincts intersect with those census blocks. And hence you need geospatial data. By the way, PBER is an RDH acronym. I don't think anybody else is using this. Maybe it'll catch on. And if you haven't figured it out already, we love acronyms. I've tried to be very careful in this presentation, but get my attention if I'm using any terminology or any acronyms that you aren't familiar with. I also want to pre-apologize if I butcher any county names. That'll be coming up later. Feel free to correct me. Okay, so spoiler alert. This is what a final PBER file looks like in the end. On the left is the two-party vote in the 2024 presidential election. Like most states, the cities tend to be blue and the rural areas tend to be red. So even without any labels on this map, you can easily find Cincinnati and Columbus and Cleveland and so on. On the right is just a different look at some data from the 2024 elections. This is the difference in support between Sherrod Brown and Kamala Harris, with darker green indicating more support for Brown relative to Harris. So kind of a reverse coattails effect, if you will, for that one. So one more important thing to note about these files up front, they are election specific. Precincts are maintained by counties, and those precincts can be split, they can be merged, they can be moved all together from election to election. So what I just showed you was the 2024 general election results on 2024 general election precincts, but those are likely somewhat different from the 2024 primary precinct boundaries, and even more different from the 2022 general election precinct boundaries, and so on. So basically, the further away two elections are in time, the more likely those boundaries are to be different. That's just a general observation. There is a lot of variation from county to county and state to state in terms of how much they change their precincts over time. So why are these files so useful for redistricting? I would say useful is actually a bit of an understatement. Essential is probably more accurate, particularly when it comes to conducting what is known as a racially polarized voting analysis, which is at the heart of Section 2 of the Federal Voting Rights Act. In most instances, it is also essential for analyzing maps that have requirements around partisanship and election results. So criteria that require competitiveness, proportionality, or requiring that maps don't favor or disfavor political parties. In almost every situation, you're going to need this data. So in other words, PBER files are necessary for identifying racial and partisan gerrymandering. So like I said, pretty useful. So that brings us to how we made this file. And please know that whenever I say we, I really mean just Peter, and in a few of the following steps, another member of our team. So step one, we collect the precinct level election results by going to the Secretary of State's website and downloading them. All right, good start. Step two, we need to process this file so it's in a format that can be joined with the precinct boundaries down the road. That means that every column needs to be one candidate and every row should be one precinct, and then all the election results are filling in all the cells. So this is what Ohio's election results look like, which are pretty good. If we zoom in a little bit here, we can see that there are a few things that need fixing. In that red box at the top there, you can see that actually the first 4 rows of this spreadsheet all contain sort of like header information and percentages and stuff like that, like total votes, things like that. We're going to need to consolidate that all down to a single row. We're also going to rename these columns so that they concisely summarize the candidates. You see that first blue column there, County Commissioner hyphen Adams County term commencing, blah, 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 blah. That's a very lengthy name. That doesn't work for a lot of folks. So we're going to basically create a unique candidate ID that's a function of their district and their party and part of their name. At the bottom in the red box, you can see the results for various offices are split up across multiple worksheets. So right now we're looking at the master, but there's the county commissioner, the county auditor, and prosecuting attorney, and so on and so forth. So we just want to make sure that all of the results that we're going to analyze are all in a single worksheet, in a single file, not spread across multiple tabs or anything like that, so that we can work with it down the line. So honestly, that is really not too bad. That's something our data team can clean up pretty quickly. So it's not all bad there data-wise in Ohio, because there are some pretty awful things going on in other states. So just to highlight some things that we sometimes have to do to get election results ready to make these files. In some places like Mississippi and New Jersey and others, they release their precinct level election results in PDFs. Sometimes it looks like they printed out a PDF and then like scanned the PDF back in, and like that's what we're looking at. They're not even the same format, you know, for all the election results. Like they all look different. So that's a lot of work to transcribe that into a spreadsheet. Some states provide their precinct level results in county specific files. So we need to download dozens and sometimes hundreds of files and combine them all into a single one. We may need to do what's pretty relatively easy. It's just called pivoting the data, which is basically the data is flip-flopped, right? If the candidates are in the rows and the precincts are in the columns, we need to flip that around so that our rows are the precincts and the candidates are in the columns. And we may need to reconcile what are usually small differences that arise in the precinct files and what is reported vote-wise at the county level. In some cases, this is clearly just a transcription error, like an extra zero being added. Ohio, for example, does not provide precinct level results for write-in candidates. So that makes it really tough to validate the precinct level votes with the county level votes. Okay, great. Halfway there, right? Well, no. Unfortunately, the precinct boundaries, especially in Ohio, are a very different story. So, step 3, we start by trying to join our cleaned up 2024 election results with a previous precinct boundary file that we have for the whole state. So in this case, a 2022 file. If in a particular county, the number of precincts that we have in our 2024 election results and the names of those precincts match what we see in the 2022 precinct boundaries, then we basically give it a provisional green light. We may still need to do some work on that county, but we're going to come back to that question later on when we do some validation of the file. If, however, there's a different number of precincts, right? There's fewer precincts, more precincts in the election results, or the names are not matching what we have in our older file, then we're going to have to do some work. We're going to have to reach out to the county and try to figure out what's going on here. As I've mentioned, precincts are maintained by counties. So that means we have to collect the precinct maps county by county. Don't know if you know how many counties Ohio has, but we do. And this requires tracking down the appropriate official in each county. That could be a county clerk, it could be a GIS analyst, it could be someone at the board of registrars. I think more so in other states, sometimes it's like a tax assessor or probate judge, you name it. We've talked to that person. Again, a lot of variation county to county and state to state. Then we're gonna, once we find the right person, we're gonna request basically an updated map. It seems like you've changed your precincts and where those precincts are, or the number of precincts since 2022. So, you know, do you have a new map that you can share with us? And then we're gonna have to ask them again. I am not sure what our record for outreach to a single county for a map is, but I can tell you that my personal record is 11 phone calls and emails over 2 months to get a map. I don't want to name this county because the woman was super nice, just like really overworked. She actually asked if I was familiar with the concept of getting trapped in an avalanche and not knowing which way was out, and that was what she felt like at work. So these officials are getting like a ton of requests for data. Sometimes they're nonsensical or like really cumbersome requests. In some cases, they're doing the job of what multiple people in other counties might do. So we try to give them the benefit of the doubt. Hopefully this little GIF works for you. Oh, great. I love it. So I would be remiss if I did not give a shout out to Jeff Wise. Hi, Jeff. Who I'm sure you all know is pretty data savvy. He and a few other folks did a ton of work for us in 2022 to help make our 2022 precinct boundary election results file happen. Jeff and a couple of those folks pitched in again in 2024, gave us a great leg up. We did end up having to do a lot of additional county contacting after that still, but it really expedited the process. So what you were seeing here, you're not meant to be able to read this. This is just a GIF of what we call our tracking spreadsheet. And we basically use this to track all the information that we need and our contact notes for reaching out to counties. So, you know, you can see the county name on the left there. You can see the contacts, election, GIS contact. And then contact notes, which in some cases is pretty extensive. So again, the point here is just that, yeah, it's a lot of work. Okay, so we've got the maps. Now what? Well, they come in a variety of file formats. Some are geospatial formats like shape files, which are great. You can tell by the smiley emoji. That's the format that we need them in for the final PBER file. Some are in PDFs, which like election results is not ideal. That's why we get a more, you know, face emoji. The data team's going to have to digitize that, meaning that they need to basically recreate the map in a geospatial format. We might also get photos of a physical map on a wall. Some counties actually didn't have a map at all, but instead shared with us what's called a street assignment file, which again needs to be converted to geospatial format. This is what a street assignment file looks like, and it basically identifies in writing what addresses, like what ranges of addresses on what streets go in what precincts. So that is, again, just a lot of manual work. So not great when we get that, but it's better than nothing. We'll take it. So step 5 is processing all these maps into shapefiles and joining them into a single statewide file. I love this image, which basically shows all the different formats that you get maps in. It was created by an attendee of the 2018 Voting Rights Data Institute, hosted by one of our data partners, MGGG. Her name is Amelia Alvarez. And conveniently, the state that she created this image for was Ohio. And so this shows all the different file formats that MGGG received when they were doing a similar data collection effort back in 2018. Like I said, these files are election specific. So every time there's a new election, we got to go back out and talk to these counties unless they didn't change their precincts. The fully colored in counties are places that had shape files. And then you can see some places that provided maps, sometimes as individual precincts, others that provided photos on the wall. That's what this one is here. I don't think have any street assignment files up here, but we certainly saw that in a number of counties. And so, like I said, we just need to turn all of these different data points into a single shapefile that, you know, looks like Ohio, and accurately captures the precinct boundaries that were in effect for the 2024 general election. Step 6. Now we join all the precincts with our election results. This is still going to require some work because the names of the precincts in the maps don't necessarily match the names of the precincts in the election results. In some cases, there are discrepancies like spelling the number 1 versus using the numeral 1. So, you know, still some work, but straightforward to figure out. But in other cases, it can take a little more puzzling And if we're ever unsure, we can always go back to the county and try to consult with them. So again, this is just an example of what you might see where on the left-hand side and I'm actually not sure which one's from the maps, which one's from the election results, right? But the difference in what the maps are calling the precincts versus the election results are calling the precincts. Now we get to the validation phase. So we validate all the maps we have, not just the new 2024 ones that we collected, but also those 2022 maps that we gave that provisional green light several steps ago. And we do this using the voter file. We primarily used a snapshot of the voter file from a vendor that we utilize, L2. That snapshot of the voter file, because that's changing constantly, what the voter file looks like. People are registering and getting added. People are getting dropped from the voter rolls, right? So we had a snapshot from October 31st, 2024, just a few days before the election. And that data contains, among other things, every voter's street address and their assigned precinct. So here's actually a screenshot of what that looks like. Just to be nice, I blacked out the names of the voters, but in a moment you'll see that isn't totally necessary. But what's important for us in any case is what's in the red box there over on the right. You can see the street address, you can see the city, you can see the state, the zip, and then you can see the precinct name, and they also have a precinct code. So this is great. Love that. So what we can do is geocode each voter's location, and that basically means we take their street address and we convert it to a latitude, longitude point, and we plot them on a map against those precinct boundaries. It's worth noting that counties don't have this data, so Peter, is actually able to be really thorough and flag potential issues that they might not be able to identify on their own. And so to make these checks easier visually, what we do is basically color code voters according to their precinct that they're assigned in the voter file. So for example, say all the voters in a precinct called Russell Township B are light blue, and all those in the precinct called New Phila Township 3C are pink, and so on. These are actually real voter file validation plots from Ohio. So here's where I butcher the names. On the left is a portion of Geauga County, and on the right is a portion of Tuscarawas County. So as I was just saying, the voters in Russell Township B precinct, according to the voter file, are plotted in light blue, and then that's on the left side, and then the shape of the precinct, according to the map, is outlined in red. There are 3 other nearby precincts voters plotted here, but you can see that nearly all of the light blue voters, the Russell Township B voters, are in the Russell Township B precinct according to the map. So that looks great. We're happy with that. On the right is an example of something that we have some questions about. So the pink is the New Phila 3C voters, and then the red outline is the New Phila 3C precinct according to the map. And you can see that there's clearly some chunks of voters that are outside of this precinct. There's also what looks like a street here that contains New Phila 3A precinct voters, and also some New Phila 3D voters that looks like another street kind of extends into this precinct. So we're going to have to go back to the county and try to figure out what's going on with this one. So the primary voter file data set that we were working with, as I mentioned, is from L2. But that might be weird for us to go back to a county and say, hey, we purchased this data from a voter vendor and it disagrees with the data your own election officials gave us. That would be really easy for them to just be like, we don't know this L2 data. And I don't know, I can't explain why there's differences with some data that you purchased from some outside company. Fortunately, Ohio has a couple advantages here. So one, there's an online polling locator tool that you only just need to enter a street address into, and you can find not only the polling place, but the precinct name. So we were able to verify what L2 was telling us matched what the state's own voter file is, because Ohio also provides an entire voter file for free. So like I said, I blacked out the names of the voters, but any of you can go and download the voter file right now from the state. And it contains everybody who's registered to vote and a lot of information about them. So, so we had the state's own voter file from August of last year. We had the L2 snapshot from right before the election. And then we had the polling locator from March, April was about when Peter was looking at this. And we could verify that the precincts was the same across all three and staying over time. So if our validation checks reveal any discrepancies and the map is from 2022, we're going to go back to the county, get an updated map. If the map's from 2024 and we're seeing these discrepancies, we're going to go back to the county and figure out what's going on. In several counties in Ohio this round, it turned out that the maps we had collected did not accurately reflect the precincts that were in place for the 2024 general election. And in these instances, counties told us actually to defer to what we were seeing in the voter file and the polling locator and not the maps that they had shared with us. So this gets an Edvard Munch scream face emoji. That's a bummer. It also meant that there were some ballot administration errors that we contacted counties about so that they could fix that and prevent that from happening in the future. This affected a non-trivial number of people. I will say we currently at present do not have any evidence that it affected the outcome of any election, but we haven't dug into it. And if there's something that was really, really close in one of these areas, it is possible that could have happened. But I, again, don't have any evidence of that at this time. And in any case, you want every voter to have the opportunity to vote for their own representatives, whether or not their vote changes the outcome of the election. Okay, I'm going to try to speed it up here. I'm getting very close to my time. So after reaching out to counties and figuring out what is going on, we needed to edit all these maps based on what we were seeing with the voter file and the county officials are telling us to do. So here is a screenshot from what's called a README, which is the documentation that accompanies the final file. Again, you're not meant to be able to read this. It's really just to be like, wow, look at all the edits they had to do and all the detail. It's a lot, because it is a lot. So we're getting very close. I'm actually going to skip over this point because this all doesn't affect you, so don't worry about it. That's just something we have to deal with in other states. And the last step for this is using a tool developed by our data partner, MGGG again, called MOP. And that package, among other things, helps to repair what are called gaps and overlaps. And those are exactly what they sound like. So gaps are areas that are not covered by any precinct. Overlaps are areas that are covered by more than one precinct. We want every area to be in one and only one precinct. And sometimes those are really small gaps and overlaps and you can't find them visually very easily. So this package helps us identify them. A situation where that might occur is, we collected all this data from individual counties. And so when we combine it into a statewide file, there might be a really tiny sliver between the counties that's not assigned to anything. So we want to, basically check that against the official county boundaries and figure out all right, does this precinct need to be moved over here or does this precinct need to be moved over here? How do we fill in all the holes? So finally, on May 13th, Peter uploaded the file. You can download it for free with an RDH account. I will stick it in the chat once I'm done here in just another minute or two. We also have the election results alone. If you're not a geospatial person and you're more of a spreadsheet person, we've got that too. And Dave from Dave's Redistricting app just returned from a well-deserved vacation. So that data is also going to be available in Dave's Redistricting app very, very soon. In conclusion, Ohio was a lot of work. But it doesn't have to be this way. As I noted, Ohio is doing a really good job in terms of their election results and their voter file data, but a lot of room for improvement on the precinct boundaries, a lot. Many other states make a statewide precinct shapefile available in geospatial format, and that includes states that have a reputation for gerrymandering, like North Carolina and Maryland. It would save all of us an awful lot of time and energy if they did that. Here's actually a screenshot of what North Carolina's precinct map directory looks like. You can see they have all the precincts over a whole period of time, and it's awesome. We love it. Beautiful. But for folks who don't live in these states, you know, understandably, like people assume that this data just exists. They're like, why aren't, you know, the day after the election, like, where is this data, right? Like, why don't you have it yet? And so this is my last point to make here. Here's actually a screenshot of Dave's redistricting on Twitter or X. This was before we got on social media, and Dave said, "We've added 2022 election data for Georgia thanks to Redistricting Data Hub. Cheers." And Florida Politics Enjoyer responds with, "Florida next, please." And Andrew Desser follows up with, "When will California be added?" And Radical Upzoner chimes in with, "And the Senate runoff, please." Which for the record, Peter worked on this file as well, and he looked into the Senate runoff, but they had changed their precinct boundaries quite a bit from the general election to the runoff. And since it was just a single election and it was a statewide election, so not really of interest for redistricting, we opted not to go down that rabbit hole. So that is my presentation. Thank you for bearing with me and taking this journey into the weeds with me. I will stop sharing my screen. I'm happy to answer any questions about that topic or other redistricting data topics that you might be wondering about.
Well, I noticed that Andrew said one of the best parts of issue 1 of last year, which is our Citizens Not Politicians. And he said, for data nerds, is that it would have required the state of Ohio to maintain a statewide precinct shapefile. Yeah.
Yes, that and there are other states that have in particular been passing state voting rights acts. That's been a big component of that legislation as well, because if you want to enforce a voting rights act, you need the data available to do so. So, but there are other ways to do that, yeah, to make the state accessible. And I got to give Andrew Green a shout out too. I didn't know you were on the call, Andrew, but Andrew also helped us with collection. Thank you.
So Trevor, did you have any questions? Because I know you were all prepared before you got here.
Well, I don't know. I have a lot of questions. Like, I don't know. I might take up too much time, but first, like these PBERs. First, can we just pronounce them Peebers, like Bieber?
I love it. Yeah, we're trying to make it catch on. Yes.
Okay, these Peebers. Are you the only one? Are you the only folks doing this?
So through 2020, we were not doing this work at all. We were relying on our data partners to do that work, and in particular, an organization called VEST, Voting Election Science Team, run by Mike McDonald out of the University of Florida. VEST does fantastic work. And just, you know, unfortunately for us, but they basically had to move to a subscription model. So starting in 2022, they are, you know, one of the only other organizations out there like doing this kind of work and doing this level of quality work. There are other groups that do it, but again, it's also by a paywall. And so some of that data is from VEST is available in Dave's redistricting app, but only as percentages. Like you can't see the actual raw vote totals. Yeah, so basically since 2022, in terms of providing the data publicly, we are the only game in town.
Well, and I was going to say, Kate, some of us will remember Michael McDonald,
Yes,
not
that's
because
what I was
he's
gonna
the
say.
singer, but because he was one of the map makers who came
That's right.
to town, and we all got super excited about being able to watch it and had some sense that there was a possibility of good maps. So you know, I often think about Michael because of that.
Yeah, I think like pioneered a lot of this work. So, you know, we certainly owe him credit.
Yeah.
Like I said, fantastic work.
And all his work got swept in the trash. Yeah. A lot of money too. We paid for that work. But all right. So do states use your work redistricting like do when they're doing redistricting, like say local like we're about to get into local redistricting. Do municipalities use your work when they're doing local redistricting?
That's a great question. At the state level, as a general rule, I mean, as I sort of alluded to at the outset, the reason we exist is because this data is not easy to obtain. And in states in particular where the state legislature is responsible for drawing the lines, like they have a whole team of analysts and staffers at their disposal, and they have that data. And so they're able to basically tell their own people to create this data, but then they don't release it publicly so that other people could draw maps or analyze the maps. So that was really a big part of the need that we were filling, is to say, like, for everybody that's on the outside that doesn't have access to this data, we want to make that data available. That being said, again, DRA in particular is used in a lot of local redistricting contexts. And so, our data is available in DRA. So I couldn't point to a specific example, but I am very sure that there are particular situations where local governments are using some of the data that we've provided through Dave's Redistricting app.
Right. And so are these people that are making our maps and getting that data, like, are they having the same kind of troubles you are of getting this data from counties? Because these, like you said, you're doing this every 2 years, I suppose. And what I've found in the work that I've been doing is like these precincts are being updated constantly through in counties. Anytime, cities are doing just redistricting or annexation or multiple things. And so, like, for example, I was looking at precinct maps earlier this year in February, in Lorraine, and uh, gathering data around that. And then I went back just a few weeks ago, and they've been changed, updated since February of this year in 25. And so, the folks, like, the maps that folks used for the primaries this year were different from 2024 general election. And so, like, how accurate, like, this was my big flag. Well, we're talking about making congressional maps, and we're getting folks down to like one person population, you know, these maps aren't accurate. Like, how accurate can these maps be? Um, if there's, because I'm looking into Dave's, and even you go down to some census blocks aren't really updated yet to compare. Like, if you go to some ward maps that are being shared city websites or on the Secretary of State's webpage, the census blocks are even different, because a lot of, when you're doing redistricting with these at the local level, I mean, you're breaking up precincts, so you're working with census block level, and the census blocks aren't even matching up from, so like, you know, I don't know, it's kind of concerning to me, when we're talking about kind of population. And speaking of population, there's another question. Like, Andrew mentioned this earlier in the chat there. We in our Ohio Revised Code, we have a limit of 1,400 electors, 1,400 registered voters per precinct. Now, Ohio has dozens, if not hundreds, of precincts that are over this limit. But how consistent is, like, because here you'll have precincts with 200 population to 2,000 population, which are right next to, you would think, oh, it's just rural versus urban, but like, you'll have them in the same township, or you'll have them in the same municipality, like precincts that are so malapportioned that it's and like, I mean, it's quite mind-boggling.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're making a lot of really good points, and I don't have great answers for that. Like, redistricting, even when we're in 2025, in terms of congressional districts, they're still looking at the 2020 data to try to ensure that it's within one person. And it's like that data was out of date before it was even released, right? I mean, and there are, it's the best we've got. But even with the census, we don't actually enumerate everybody. Like, we know that there are certain populations you know, like Native Americans, young kids, other groups that are just historically undercounted. And so, you know, so like the data is already messy coming in, and then the farther away you get from that, the more sort of out of whack it is. But it's kind of a situation where it's like that's what everybody uses, and you know, it's the best data available. But you know, I did want to address to your sort of something you were asking at the outset of your question, just like how difficult is it for states to get this data? You know, I actually don't know the process exactly of like how the state goes about making this data set. But something tells me if the Secretary of State sends out an email to all their county offices and says like, hey, send me your maps. They get them like that. And they may also be requiring the counties to stay in contact about updates. I don't know, actually. You know, this is just a guess. But I will tell you that we have recently encountered in another state some counties that, you know, basically just refuse to share a map with us, which is really crazy because, again, it's like, look at the voter file. I mean, if you want to talk about being protective of information, like that's got a lot of stuff in there, like forget the precinct map. But, you know, whatever, they didn't want to share the map with us, so we put in some records requests. And we got denied. And the denial was that we were an unsafe organization. And a separate county had told us that we needed to get permission from their Secretary of State to collect this map. So, you know, there are like absolutely blockers that states and bad actors can put out there to try to prevent folks like us from just making the data that they have available to them available to the rest of us. So.
Yeah. All right. I'm sorry. That leads me just to my last question, which is like, and Jeff is leading over there in the comments too. You know, it's like, what can the Secretary of State do? Like, you know, he's always like, you know, LaRose is always bragging about how efficient our elections are. Well, what can he do to like what can we do to make sure that we can get like, you know, some common sense reform here?
Yeah, well, I mean, just because your elections are efficient doesn't make them transparent or accessible. So, you know, again, it's like this is data that they have to have. And, you know, like we're going to make it. So I guess if they want to make life hard for us all, they can do that. And we'll still make the data available. But again, there are so many other states. I don't have a count off the top of my head, but probably 50% of states do provide a statewide precinct boundary file. Now, in some cases, even those are not ideal. Again, like Peter will tell you, Georgia puts out a statewide file. It's not very good. And we've still had to go talk to a lot of counties. But it's a huge start because Georgia has like 160 some odd counties, right? So like that would be such a pain to have to go county by county. But this is like not a weird or uncommon thing. There are lots and lots of states that put this file out, and it's not going to be like I said, like we're going to do that work. So you know, if they want to make life hard, okay, fine, we'll do it the hard way. But you know, like they
All right.
still control the redistricting at present, and that's the real problem, right? Not that they're not making the data available. Like that's not the secret to their gerrymandering.
Well, we appreciate, I especially appreciate the work you're doing over there. You know, and thank you, Andrew and Jeff and everyone else, volunteers who pitch in to get that data and all on and everything you're doing over there to help us out.
And you'll notice, Kate, I threw in your email in there, because now we have an eye on local redistricting.
Yeah,
Trevor, are you ready?
I'll blast through this really quick since you've been looking at this slide here for a while. Yeah, you know, it's just a lot, the precinct, re-precincting and the redistricting at a local level has a lot of overlap, you know, because when they're doing this redistricting at a local level, a lot of the times they're busting up precincts to get that equal population, and then the Board of Elections are redrawing those precincts to match like municipal wards. And so we need to keep an eye on local district redistricting just because, you know, we do have more reform coming up. And this is a way, that we can have an in that is less partisan, that has impact on daily lives. We could start with these local redistricting and let folks know, hey, this isn't a bad thing. This is a good thing, and create some comfort with this reform and inoculate folks against this horrible deception and misinformation that they get when we try to pass a good redistricting reform. And we'll go ahead to the next slide there. And Kate went over like a lot of precincting has a lot of to do with the Federal Voting Rights Act, like the big two federal requirements and districting, and then that equal population. A lot to do. Again, so much overlap with precincting, and then we've got some other additional requirements set by the Ohio Revised Code with respecting political boundaries, contiguity, and compactness. There. Next slide. And so really, I added precincts in here because we need your help. Like, thank you, Andrew and Jeff. We need everybody. Like, what do your council wards look like? What do your districts look like? What do your precincts look like? Research, go to your city council website, look through your charter. Is there any rules or guidelines in place for redistricting? Like, if you see down there, a lot of cities, being a home rule state, Ohio has a lot of cities that are able to put specific requirements around redistricting within their city charter. And so just take a look and who's making these decisions? Like, when were they last updated? There's district lines that haven't been updated in 30, 40 years, all right, that are in need of redistricting. And that goes with precincts too. Like, Kate, there was an article down in Greene County that they haven't done any kind of re-precincting in like 30 years, they said. And here in Franklin, they're constantly re-precincting, but like it's like piecemeal here and there, and it's never consistent. It's so a lot to look at, and we need your help to collect this data. There's so much stuff out there, and so take a look and see what needs to change, and feed that data to us, please. And I'll throw my email in there as well. Just a real quick update on what we're doing down in Nelsonville. We had those couple meetings last month and in April. Our next meeting is June 16th on Monday, and it's Founders Day in Nelsonville. Back 207 years ago, 1818, or 1818, Daniel Nelson laid out the first plat map of Nelsonville, laying out the first 57 lots and making Nelsonville a city. So Founders Day, the 16th, where there's a big celebration downtown in the plaza, a whole weekend celebration. And then on Monday, after the celebration, we're going to file into the public library and draw some city council maps, some city council ward maps with everyone participating. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then we're going to have a couple of those drawing sessions in June, maybe one more in July, early July as well, and then present to the Nelsonville City Council in July. All right, next. And then we also, I wanted to just, this is really like a tool that we'd like all municipalities to kind of start using, like have a dedicated, like when redistricting comes around, have a dedicated web page where you can get information and participate. Cleveland did this, during their redistricting process back in October through December. And this is what we got up for Nelsonville. If you go to lwvohio.org/Nelsonville redistricting, it's a beautiful website that Nazik helped me create. But this is just a little snapshot of something, like things that we've got there, a timeline, and then ways to be involved. Like, I've put together a short guide to Dave's redistricting for city council drawing, like ward drawing. And then I've also put together like a Nelsonville template where you could just start, everything set up for you, just start drawing. And then we have a public comment portal where folks can submit feedback and submit maps that they've drawn. And so we're really looking forward to getting everyone involved, and we really want to use Nelsonville as a template and a guide to what could be possible in future in municipalities that are looking to redraw or draw new voting districts. All right, and I think that's it there for me. Yes,
Yep.
this is Catherine. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Trevor.
So I suspect this is something that we are heading into congressional map making yet again. Senate President now, the Speaker of the House, Matt Huffman, announced just a few days ago that they were going to begin informal negotiations in August, and then they hope to get map making accomplished through the state legislature, but it might also go to the Ohio Redistricting Commission. One of the things as we approach this, we're hoping to think about, well, how can we do this in creative ways? We do know that there was a real shift in the US Supreme Court. And so it will be this is going to be a challenge, and we will need all of you to help us make a push. Mia, if you'll move to the next slide. And then I did want to I think this is something that we mentioned last time, that even though they said, hey, what we're going to do is have informal negotiations beginning in August, well, they're having informal negotiations. And so right now, I threw in a draft map that's being, traded behind the scenes at the State House. And as you can see, just a dreadful division of community, just incredible, clearly not proportional. So we will have our work cut out for us when we get to August, September, or October. And that could go all the way until the end of November. So just wanted to prepare you all for that. And with that, Mia, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, so just to remind folks that the Ohio House and Senate map will stay the same, because that map was voted on and agreed in a bipartisan manner. But because the congressional map was not, it has to be redrawn. So that's why we're doing just one of the maps and not all three of the maps. And I think, last time we went into this, excited because we had passed the reforms in 2015 and 2018, and we thought we've got a better process and this is going to be exciting. And then we had a couple of real hard years there. And then we, where we testified and we did all those things and we pushed really hard, and we got to the Supreme Court and the Ohio Supreme Court, and we won some cases. We won lots of cases, but they still drew bad maps. So it's a different picture going into it this time, but we're still going to fight back, and we're still going to push back. And we're, if they gerrymander, we're going to make them, sorry, I've got some spicy smoke in the air here. We're going to make sure that, everybody knows that they're gerrymandering. So map making is ahead of us. We did also just want to bring to your attention that our ability to bring issues to the ballot, we didn't win issue 1 in the fall, but we have won other issues before that, and the leaders in the State House really do still see that as a threat. And so there are still efforts to make it harder for us to bring issues to the ballot, for citizens to collect signatures and bring issues directly to the ballot. And some of that right now is in, that's supposed to be SB 153 and HB 233. That's inverse there. We're pushing back against that. We hope that the election officials are as well, because these pair of bills are, really, really hard on the boards of elections in terms of the added unfunded mandates. But just bringing that to your attention, and I'm sure we'll send out in our follow-up some action that you can take to help us push back on SB 153. And I think, yeah, this is just an example of one thing that would change in 153 is that if you made any correction, if you were filling out a petition booklet and you put a wrong anything and you crossed it out and you initialed it, the whole book would be thrown out if 153 passed, which is clearly just an attempt to make it harder to collect signatures. And there are other bad things as well. And this is some press that we've had recently about 153. But here we all are with our wonderful signs and our wonderful smiles and our incredible, citizen energy. So we appreciate. Oh, I see some people on this in this picture who are on this call. So give yourself a.
Yeah, I see Libby.
Yeah, I see
Right?
Libby. I saw her right off, and I'm sure there are others. So, um, thank you guys so much for. I see Trevor. I see lots of folks. So thank you for persisting. We are going to take a break in July. We are not going to have a huddle in July. We'll send out a reminder. And then in August, we're going to have a huddle and we're going to kind of kick off our redistricting for the season. So we're going to send lots of follow-up with helpful links and to actions that you can take. We'll have a break in July and then we'll get back together in August. Any questions, Catherine, Trevor?
I just,
Jane?
what Wenda was asking about the map. So just wait for the follow-up. You'll get the map, including a link to Dave's redistricting app, so that you can actually look at it in more detail. Because I'm sorry, a screenshot does not get the job done when it comes to all the devil in the detail of map making.
But
Well, I
isn't
just
it
wanted to,
that Andrew made that map? So that's not that's we don't know that that's a map that they're actually discussing. We just know it's a map floating out there in the
okay, she's right. We don't know.
that we suspect. Yeah. Anyway.
Okay, I was gonna say, I think we know.
Okay.
At least we know some folks are. So on that note, trying to hold our cards close to the vest, but also wanted to give you a sense of like, well, what kind of real shenanigans could they actually get up to? I did want to say a special thank you to Kate and to Peter. We just really appreciate your making time at the end of your day to help us better understand all of the things that go into creating the data so that we can do community mapping, so that we can do mapping of congressional map making, so that we can go and testify. And I think this will help us get all prepared. And I noticed that Jeff said the Redistricting Data Hub rocks. And so a big, big thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, that is why we are here, to support groups like you all, even in the tough times. So we are rooting for you for sure. And if there is ever any other data or analysis needs that you all need, we do rapid map analysis, for example. So just come talk to us. We're here to help.
We'll be giving you a phone call in September and October, so be prepared.
Yes. Thank you so much. Good night, everybody.
Thank you all.
Bye.